fantastic. So on this particular live stream, I wanted to talk about a bunch of things that come with dual citizenship, because some people uh, might think it's a little less complicated than it actually is to be citizen in two places at one time, and other people might think it's even impossible. And so let's talk about it. And the reason that this video is titled Dual Citizenship Facts and Facts, Facts FAQs, frequently asked questions and facts, is because I'd like to answer 10 pretty poignant questions about dual citizenship and how is that going to impact um, your citizenship on both sides of it, as well as taxation and things like that, and how much does residence matter compared to citizenship itself. So let's get into it. After just a couple of seconds, because I wanted to mention how it does seem like a great idea sometimes to get a second citizenship and have another passport, a second passport. That sounds fun. But lots of times, becoming a citizen somewhere ends up obligating you in different ways, whether it be military service or taxation or anything like that. And so let's get into it. And I guess, yeah, the first question I would like to provide some answer for, some semblance of answer for, is whether or not, if someone asks, can a second citizenship make you eligible for the draft, right? Because that's a big worry about being a citizen, and especially in a lot of places, it's particularly male citizens who have to be eligible to be drafted in the case there is a draft, or have mandatory military service around the time they become adults and all that. And so there's that, and yeah, and so you would have to look at the rules for each specific country, of course. But yeah, and sometimes a citizenship, whether you inherited it or whether you were naturalized and acquired it, but sometimes it can carry military service obligations. Um, and so even if a country doesn't usually do a draft, but they do require all men, once they reach a certain age, to do a little military service, yeah, you might actually end up getting obligated to do that. And I guess one good example would be the country of South Korean. So if you're a South Korean national, males, every male citizen, including dual nationals who live elsewhere, right? And not just people living in South Korea, but also South Korean men living elsewhere. They are liable for some military service around the time they hit adulthood. And so a male uh, dual citizen, you would have to avoid being obligated to give to do military service in South Korea. You would have to give up your Korean citizenship by, I believe, it's the date is by March 31st of the year that you turn 18. Otherwise, you are on the hook for some military service. And that's just one example. That's just South Korea, for instance. But that would be good to know if you're, let's say, a teenager uh, who's living in one country and has citizenship there, but also has South Korean citizenship, even though you didn't even really grow up there. Um, that's good to know that you need to make sure that you renounce your South Korean citizenship by March 31st of the year that you turn 18, just in order not to be necessarily obligated to do military service. And South Korea is not the only country that requires young adults to do military service, especially the males. But I just figured that was a good example to give. And so I guess I'm moving on to the second question that I wanted to answer. The question is, can I lose my old citizenship just for getting a new one? That too is a really good question, and turns out it depends on uh, what is your original citizenship more than anything else, what country it's with. And because, yes, there's, for example, if you have Chinese citizenship or Japanese citizenship, and so Chinese or Japanese nationals who have settled abroad, if you voluntarily acquire a new foreign nationality, a dual citizenship, um, you might automatically lose your citizenship in China or Japan, whichever the two your original citizenship was in. And that's without any application, without any notice to you or anything, just sort of automatically not a citizen anymore in China. And it works very similarly in Japan. And by the way, it's not just China and Japan. They're not the only two countries in the world who did this. I believe that Austria does something very similar. Uh, and again, it's your old citizenship can be sort of revoked just for getting a new one by a small number of countries, but yes, it is a possibility. So you should absolutely look into that before getting your second citizenship, just to make sure that your country is not one of the ones that's going to take away your nationality there just because you become a citizen elsewhere too, right? Um, and I used to think that was the case in the US, and I think it possibly was at some point during my lifetime when I was much younger. But these days, I don't think that's a problem. Because oh no, the U.S. we didn't yank away people's citizens. We more like it's more like we made them only be loyal to the U.S. and not any other country in order to get American citizenship. But that's actually uh, these days, the U.S. does recognize dual citizenship. So we were certainly not one of the countries that would take away your American citizenship just for becoming a citizen elsewhere. At least not in an automatic way like you see happening in China or Japan. And so yes, the next question is on a very related note is to get naturalized in another country, do I have to give up my original nationality? So it's a very similar question. This one isn't about automatic unenrollment, but do you have to renounce other citizenships? And sometimes that is the truth, such as well, countries are very split on this issue of whether they do or do not recognize dual citizenship. And like I said, in the US, we do recognize dual citizenship these days. That's absolutely true. But in Austria, let's bring up Austria again. That's one good example. Usually, they will not naturalize an applicant if somebody is applying to become an Austrian citizen. They really won't naturalize that citizen until that person has expended every opportunity. They have made every single step they could to renounce their original citizenship. Or if the Austrian government gives you permission ahead of time, there are exceptions and whatnot. But yeah, in some places, to get you're not going to become a dual citizen because you got to give up your first citizenship first. And so, I would really look into that to see because if you're going to end up with a passport that lets you travel a whole lot less. It's a little weaker than your old one was. Then you might not want to go there. Anyway, just a thought. Just a thought. And so that was the first three frequently asked questions and some information on it. And a lot of times it's really important to, um, to check with the laws of your own country because they do vary from one country to the next. And and so question number 4, again we have 10 altogether that we're doing. So question number 4 now, I'll move on to that. Um, and this one's about citizenship through bloodlines. Like if you have ancestors and other relatives, if your family was from one country, but you have never been there or lived there or anything like that. So, do citizenship through bloodlines have any generation limit to them or not? And this is absolutely in most countries. They do put a generation limit on how many generations a family has been outside of the U.S. And can still remain citizens. In a lot of countries, I think most often it's like a one generation limit. So if your parents emigrated from the country, left, went somewhere else, and then you were born in the other country, a lot of places do recognize you as a citizen of the country. Some places even have you only have to have grandparents who are citizens of that country to be eligible for it. But like I said, most countries do cut the number of generations off somewhere, and that is part of what made me thinking about dual citizenship in the first place. Is because more Americans than ever are applying to become Canadian citizens right now. And this has a lot to do with the fact that Canada, in December of 2025, so just last year, they actually passed a bill that changed their rules because they did have a first generation limit on it. So if your parents are Canadian, and then they moved into the US and you're born in the US, you were still considered a Canadian citizen, but your children would not be at that point. But in December, they changed this rule. So now you just have to prove direct lineage to a Canadian, and that Canadian who would have had to been living there and a citizen there for, I think, somewhere near 3 years by the time the birth of the next generation happened. And and it's not just Americans who are applying to become Canadian citizens. Also, a lot of English people are, and well, a lot of people from Western Europe and elsewhere. And since they changed their policy, so now you can be, if you can trace yourself and directly link back to a great 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 grandparent or something like that who is Canadian, you can get Canadian citizenship. And by the way, it's not that expensive of a fee to do it, but if you work with a genealogist or a lawyer, it might end up costing you thousands of dollars to do that for sure. Um, and Anyway, uh, thanks for being here in the chat. Nice to see you. Anyway, and so because Canada got rid of the first generation limit, all of a sudden there are backlogs and they're taking so many applications for people becoming Canadian citizens that the waiting list is a long time. People are waiting for months and months, sometimes in some places well over a year. Or at least that's what they're predicting the wait time is going to be, because again, they just changed the law in December. And so that's pretty disappointing that they have such a backlog and long waiting times at different consulates throughout Europe. And But hey, it gives people some hope. And how do you prove that you are a Canadian citizen? Basically, what you need to do for your application is give your long form birth certificate, not the short form, but the long one, and the long form birth certificate for each parent, each generation, going back to link until you link it to a Canadian family, a Canadian grandparent or great grandparent or anything like that. But it does have to be a direct link in ancestry. And some of those birth certificates, especially from a long time ago, might be hard to come by. So you might end up needing to hire somebody to help you out with that. But that would be the most expensive part of the application there. Anyway, so that's yeah, that's the fourth thing, is that yeah, most countries do limit the number of generations that they consider uh, descendants of citizens to still be citizens when they're living their whole lives abroad and raised abroad and everything like that. But Canada just sort of reversed course on that in case you have a Canadian ancestry. uh, Whole direct chain of birth certificates to help prove it, and that will get you in. And otherwise, the application is not that expensive. So the hard part is locating all the birth certificates, and if you can do that much without spending thousands and thousands of dollars for a genealogist or a lawyer, then it won't be all that expensive to become a Canadian citizen. Anyway, so there's that. And there's also other ways of acquiring citizenship. Did you know in some countries they had programs where you can actually buy citizenship? It's there have been programs called in investment to passport uh, programs and things like that, where you actually might, it's a financial transaction. You're basically buying off citizenship with an application, of course. Um, but you should really, if you're thinking of doing it that way, you should bear in mind that you need to treat, if it's transactional like that, you need to treat it as conditional, and you need to get informed on the rules of both countries in question, because some of these rules that govern status and revocation of your status and all of that, some of them can change sometimes. And so you want to be well informed about that. And this has become a thing within the last year or so in the European Union. It's, I think that Malta is the one who's getting a lot of slack for that, because they had this well, they had this program where you could invest, so-called invest, to get their passport, which means you're buying citizenship in Malta. um, that seems to violate this European Union rule, because Malta is part of the European Union and has been for a good 22 years now. So they should probably know the rules there. But in the EU, they have this rule where you you cannot get a citizenship of any European Union state through financial transaction alone, right? That should be against the rules according to the EU. And so Malta, well, I mean, they have their own arguments as to why this is okay and all that, but I'm just saying they were sort of falling under fire there for that, because, um, and sadly, way back in 2002, so this would be, of course, when the EU was pretty new altogether. Um, Similar thing happened in Cyprus, whereas in Cyprus, they had to like revoke the citizenship of a couple hundred people so that they could conform to the EU standards and whatnot. And yeah, so people who had paid for citizenship and been naturalized and all that just had it yanked right away. So yeah, I'm not recommending anybody go buying themselves a new citizenship, because those tend to be yeah, the rules tend to change a little bit on those over time, whether it be the rules of the country you're a citizen of, or the rules of the larger unit that the country is in, like the EU or something. So absolutely, that to me is interesting because A, it's interesting that anywhere just allows you to buy citizenship, but B, it's interesting to me that it could be yanked away because of any change in rules going on. So, uh-oh. Anyway, so that was thing number 5. Again, we're talking about 10 related things, all on the theme of dual citizenship. And so the next one, number 6, this is going to be if someone asks, okay, if I was born abroad and live abroad, can my citizenship lapse? Like, can citizenship lapse just because, yes, you are a national of this of a certain country, but you were born abroad and lived abroad your whole time? And the answer is yes. In some cases, it absolutely can. It can lapse. For instance, let me look for a good example. Yes, Denmark. Denmark is a good example of a country that will do that to you, because the Denmark Nationality Act, it says that a Dane born and living abroad who has never lived in Denmark, they automatically lose their Danish citizenship at the age of 22. And uh, but unless this losing their Danish citizenship would make them stateless entirely. Like, let's say they never got any other citizenship, then Denmark would not take theirs away just because you never lived in Denmark if you were a citizen originally. But that could be one danger of getting dual citizenship there. You might have your Danish citizenship taken away from you if you did end up getting another citizenship in the meantime before the age of 22. Then you hit 22 and Denmark will yank it away from you just like that. So that's a little wow. Anyway, I would hate to be in the shoes of somebody that happened to. And like I said, a lot of times this citizenship stuff can be a little complicated and depend very much on which countries rather you are a dual citizen of. And thank you for the reactions in the live chat there. That's very cool. I like to see that. Thank you so much. And and a lot of these uh, questions about dual citizenship do have to do with taxation, taxes. And so the next one absolutely does. Um, and this is about death taxes. And I know with YouTube rules, I shouldn't be using that word, but death taxes, this is a kind of thing where, and so the question is, do death taxes follow citizenship or just my physical address, just what country I'm living in? And yes, in a lot of cases, whether your heirs have to pay taxes off your estate, of course, for your passing away, yeah, sometimes that can have much more to do with citizenship than the actual place you were living when you did pass away. Um, for example, the U.S. Yeah, okay, now I can bring the U.S. back into this. The U.S. does tax the worldwide estate of American citizens, regardless of where they were living at the end, what country they were living in at the end. Um, and so, and that's a thing because that can end up falling on your heirs, right? Whether it be children or grandchildren who are is inheriting your estate, yeah, they might end up having to pay those taxes on this, even if you have not been living in the U.S. For the last bit of your life. If you maintained American citizenship the whole time, there's going to be a tax on your estate after you pass. Anyway, so That's disappointing, but it's something to bear in mind. It's whether or not, whether or not you want to hold on to your American citizenship all the way. If you're living abroad, um, I guess it can have an impact on whether your heirs will end up paying taxes off your estate for that reason. And the U.S. is not the only country who does this in the world, but a lot of countries, income taxes and lots of kinds of taxes, it's based on your residence residing in that country. But the U.S., we tend to tax citizens often, even when they're living elsewhere. And so, on that note, um, um, can giving up a citizenship or can giving up a citizenship or long-term residence trigger a tax on the way out, on your way out when you're moving place? And this, I can bring up the US again for this one, because yes, if a country has an exit tax like the US does, um, yes, you can actually, you're leaving your residence there or giving up your citizenship there can trigger a sort of tax. If an expat, for example, has a net worth of at least $2 million, 2 million American dollars or more, um, or if your net income tax over the last 5 years exceeds a certain threshold, years later, the bill could even land on the people you leave behind in the US. So that's a little alarming. And and again, it's because oftentimes the US, in terms of are we taxing you or not, depends more on your citizenship as opposed to whether you're physically living here in the country at the time, right? Anyway, so there is that. And I guess we're all the way, yeah, we covered now 5, 6, 7, and 8 of them now. Um, so now on to number 9. Like I promised, at least 10 subjects that I could answer some questions about. And so number 9 is, can citizenship tax you for life no matter where you live? Um, yeah, in at least 2 cases anyway. This isn't true for a lot of countries, citizenship in a lot of places. I've only found 2 actually, which doesn't mean that there aren't more than 2, but that's all I could find, which is not very many considering how many countries there are in the world. And those 2 are the United States of America and Eritrea. And so those are the only 2 I found. But yes, in both of those cases, um, such as we have in the U.S., the U.S. taxes its citizens on wide income, wherever they happen to be residing. So that's important to know. I have a friend who got in a lot of trouble one time about that. Where she was living in Italy for years, not paying taxes in the US, not even filing them in the US. But turns out that the US tracked her down and was coming after her for back taxes eventually, and she had to get an international tax attorney and go through this whole thing. Yeah, it was a big deal. And and so, yeah, I wouldn't want to be in her shoes. Well, her shoes back then, anyway. Although she did end up getting married in Italy, so she might have. I'm not sure whether she maintained her U.S. citizenship or not, because I haven't seen her since she got married, actually. So, anyway, so I don't have confirmation on that, but what I do know is, yeah, sometimes even if you're not physically living in the U.S., our government might come after you for taxes since you're an American citizen. And there is we do have this thing where the U.S. government sort of um, pushes foreign banks to um, to let them know if any American nationals have bank accounts there and whatnot. And so it doesn't really prove an income per se, but it does prove a certain amount of financial solvency. If they know if you have bank accounts and all that, that means some money. So yeah, that's a little um, yeah, that's a bummer. For if you thought you could just move away and then not have to pay taxes in the U.S. A lot more of times, it's a little more complicated than that. But anyway, and yeah, so now we're getting to the 10th. Yeah, now we're all the way to the 10th question that I wanted to make sure I could answer today, and that is, can a new nationality change your legal name? And absolutely, getting a new nationality can often, yeah, often will change your legal name, and not to one that you're deciding or anything, not to one that you're choosing, but it can be a change to your legal name. And a lot of times this happens if a to make a passport, to give a citizen a passport and whatnot, it has to render your name in a fixed way. And so any country giving out passport, well, every country has passports as far as I'm concerned, but anyway, um, but the authority giving out the passport, they really have to render your legal name in a fixed way, and often a new citizenship can end up changing the spelling or the structure of your name that you didn't in ways that you didn't even pick. And so the most common case of something like this is called transliteration. Means if you are um, born, if your birth certificate name and all that is from a language that doesn't use Latin script. So if you, let's say, for example, if it's written in Arabic script or Chinese script or Cyrillic or any other number of different scripts that's not a Latin script, then they will transliterate your name to fit into a Latin script, and then that's your new legal name right there. And you didn't pick it, and but it is still legal document. This is as a citizen. This is your name, and there you go. So that's a little worrisome to me that your name might get changed on you, and you don't even have any saying on how it comes out afterwards. Anyway, that's a little yeah, that's a little alarming. But anyway, so I do hope that some of this information can be useful, or at least was interesting for you. And long story short, when it comes to questions about taxation and maintaining of your original citizenship and whatnot, and whether it can be revoked or just lapse or anything like that, you do want to check with the rules, with aka the laws of each of the two countries of which you are or are considering becoming citizens, um, because it can make a lot of difference. And also, again, yeah, the U.S., we tend to tax people kind of around the world. Although, if U.S. Citizen is living abroad for a long, long time, like they're really expat, often they only to get taxed if their income meets a certain threshold. So the wealthier are going to be a lot worse off in that case. But anyway, yeah. So there you go. I think that was yeah, that was all 10 points I wanted to cover. So I hope this information was useful to you. And yeah, and if you're not subscribed to the channel yet, please do consider subscribing. And that would be fantastic. And since there have been no questions in the chat related to dual citizenship, I will just leave it at everything I have stated so far. I hope that questions that you had would have fell into one of those 10 categories. Um, And yeah, so thanks a lot for hanging out with me on this Friday night, and I'm looking forward to talking to you again soon. And until then, catch you around next time. Bye bye.